My Voice is a chance for those who have struggled with addiction, homelessness, depression, and domestic violence to have a candid conversation about their life experience, current situation, and future goals and aspirations. Every episode is conducted anonymously to facilitate a comfortable and safe place for guests to tell their story. My Voice is hosted by Mike Sisson, who works as a case manager at the My House facilities in Wasilla, Alaska. We now join a My Voice conversation, already in progress.
You know what my pet peeve is?
What?
Shirts that are too short.
Yeah, why did they do that?
Oh no. I really wish they wouldn't.
Or I think it's pretty stupid that so men, y'all have the choice of a regular shirt or a tall shirt.
It's true, we do.
Why the fudge don't I get that?
You should get
Or
that.
why do I have to buy a men's coat? Because if I go like this in a women's coat, it goes right there.
Yep.
Because I'm not allowed to have
Right. You have to fit into the
stuck.
size standards that they make for us.
Hello.
Is this thing on? Hello.
Hello.
And welcome to the podcast where we make up our own accent and we don't really follow any rules. We just change it up as we go.
We do it, we won't.
Yes. So, back when the viral photo of the dress
Oh no.
was sweeping across the internet, did you see blue and black or white and gold?
It was blue and black.
Ah, yes. Yes, it was. Anybody who says different is wrong. That's just period. That's just all there is to it. You're wrong. If you saw white and gold, you have problems. Why don't you start by telling me about where you were born? Where are you from?
I was born in the Palmer Courthouse when it was the hospital in Wasilla, in Alaska. In Wasilla. No, it was Palmer, actually. Hold on. Wait a minute. I know where I live.
That's epic.
Yeah, my mom was actually leaving an overtime shift. She worked at the hospital in the lab.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then she was like, whoops, I'm not actually going to leave.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, and she told me for a long time that how pissed she was because she couldn't go home and change. She had to go back in her scrubs.
Okay. And did you live in Palmer most of your life?
No, I lived in Wasilla.
Okay.
I think at one point I technically would have lived in Palmer. We lived in this little apartment until I was 3, but then they bought a house in Wasilla.
Okay. Did you ever leave the state for a long period of time?
No.
Cool. So born and raised in Alaska.
Yeah.
AK for life.
Yep. Don't know poisonous snakes. Found a baby copperhead in Arkansas when I went for my grandma's wedding. Yeah, copperheads are poisonous. Didn't know it was poisonous. I had it.
Picked it up and we're holding it.
Yep. Had it in my bra and everything. Eating lunch with my aunt, and then it kind of crawled out, and she flipped her rig, getting all mad. She was like, "Don't move, don't move, don't move." And I was like, "Oh, this is my friend. I named him Fred. Do you think my mom would let me take him home?" She's like, "That's a copperhead." I was like, "Oh, so no?"
So no, it's a copperhead.
Yeah. They're poisonous.
There we go. Now we're there. Let's get rid of that. So you born and raised in Alaska, born in Palmer at the courthouse when it was a hospital. Pretty cool.
Right.
A little bit of history. I actually didn't know that. So
Yeah, the courthouse used to be the Palmer Hospital.
that's incredible. During your time growing up in Wasilla, let's talk about your childhood. So let's talk about earliest memories up until, let's go into teenage years. Talk about that. What was your life like? How did you grow up?
I grew up, both of my parents are pretty old, like, respectfully. They're, I don't know, they kind of raised me on this philosophy of like, you live and you learn, do it yourself. Not that that's a bad thing, but I kind of just, anything I did wrong, they were like, why would you do it like that? That's how you do it. And I'm like, oh, all right, now I know. Okay, got it. You're right. So, most of my childhood I kind of played by myself. I had a couple childhood friends, but they were just kids in the neighborhood. I just did things by myself. played outside a lot, like most kids up here.
Gotcha. Okay.
Pretty imaginative. My parents, they kind of had a pretty strained relationship, so most of the time I tried to just be outside or like be all imaginative and ignore the screaming and the fighting.
So a lot of fighting then in your house growing up.
A lot.
Was it just between parents, or did you guys have a lot of family come through, or was it pretty much like you, your mom, and your dad?
It was, for the most part, it was just my mom and my dad. I had an aunt that lived up here until I was about 15. Yeah, 15, but I didn't really see her that much. I would go to her house a lot in the summertime, but I didn't really know most of my family. Like, we kind of just like, oh yeah, talk to your grandma. And I'd talk to her and I'd be like, yeah. And she'd always like get off the phone kind of upset. She's like, well, I can see you don't want to talk. And it's like, well, I don't want to talk. It's like, I talk to you every 5 months. I don't know you.
Yeah, we've
like,
never
I'm
met.
sorry.
I know the cashier at Cars better than you.
Yeah, so, and most of my family, like, all, like, some of them I have on Facebook, and they'll just comment, you never talk to me. And it's like, well, yeah, that goes both ways. I don't know you. I'm the kid here.
Yeah.
Like, now I'm an adult and I still don't know you. Like, what do you?
Now, when you were growing up and your parents would fight a lot, was there ever any like really bad times, or was it just like kind of chaos regularly, like screaming, yelling, fighting? Or
it would kind of fluctuate a lot. When it would fluctuate, it was more like there wouldn't be yelling, but it would be very passive aggressive silence. I remember when I was 7 years old, I asked my dad, "Why don't you leave, Mom?"
Wow,
a 7-year-old shouldn't put that together at all.
No. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty weird conversation to have with your dad.
Yeah, I bet you probably took him off guard.
Very much so.
Yeah.
He said, "Will we stay together for you?" And I was like, "I don't like that." I remember very specifically saying, "I don't like that."
Yeah. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, and I think is a great thing to point out, is that when you have disagreements as an adult and they're done around children, whether you believe it or not, it's impacting the kid. It's impacting them in a negative way.
Yeah. There was never, like, resolution was never shown, actually. The resolution would just be, okay, here's dinner. We're just going to passive-aggressively not talk to each other. Or we're going to watch this movie and look all grumpy. Like, there was no solution. So, like, even now when I have, a simple argument with my husband, I go into flight mode because it's going to hit the fan. It's going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is. It's healthy. I mean, if we have an argument, even if it's in front of our, my kids, we make sure that we show the resolution in front of them too.
Yes.
And that, okay, we're okay. This is good.
Yes. That is important.
Just like it still impacts every day still for me. I can't handle arguments. I can't handle conflict at all. I just immediately fight or flight. This is going to be so bad.
That was your upbringing up until the point. Let's go into teenage years now. So, really, I want to know the point where, because I know that you have, I know some of your past, and I don't. It's not my story to share. So I want you to. Why don't you start sharing and telling me about your life from the point where you started exploring and kind of just being like, I'm going to try some crazy stuff.
Well, I will preface this with, I understand being a parent. It's terrifying to have to let your kid know about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know. Otherwise, you're going to have your 14-year-old daughter thinking she's smoking pot for the first time and it's methamphetamines. Because I was not allowed. I was allowed to have sex education. I was allowed to know about my period, all those things, not to be TMI, but whatever. It's life. Get over it.
Yeah, for real.
But anytime there was anything about drugs, we would learn about drugs. All I was allowed to get, my parents were they allowed me to have those little ribbons of, I'll be drug free.
Dang.
But I was not allowed. They would pull me out of the class. I would have to go sit in the nurse's office and sit with her and just sit there while they talked about drugs. So I genuinely, you know, like I did not know what drugs looked like. I knew pot was dope. My parents are they were both teenagers in the 70s. So dope is pot then. So I just got a whim when I was 14 and I was like, you know what? My mom, she was very verbally abusive to me and very emotionally abusive. My dad was clearly on something. I didn't know what he was on. I just thought maybe he's on dope.
Mm-hmm.
He was on opiates, found out that a little later on. But, you know, and I was I didn't get it. I didn't understand anything about Jack, but I was 14 and I was an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went up to the sketchy person, Marcella Lake, and I was like, yeah, I want some dope. And this guy probably still, like, to this day is just, like, conflicted in himself, I would hope, because he sees this, like, clearly not a person that knows what they're doing.
Right.
Trying to say, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Give me some of that dope.
Yeah, and he asked me if I wanted dark or clear. And I was like, I don't know which one. And I was like, oh, I like clear. I do that all the time. Yep, that's the one.
That's the one for
Yeah, and
me.
he handed me, the little thing, and I didn't know how to do it. He showed me how to do it. 'Cause he's like, you've done this before? And I was like, yeah, I left my thing at home. Your pipe? Yeah, that. Yeah, I don't have it. And he's still, like, sitting there like, okay, we're going to do, okay. And he got money, so.
Yep, exactly.
I got, ridiculous.
Yeah. So how was that first experience for you? Not knowing anything, not being told anything or taught anything, and then you do it.
I thought I was on top of the world. I had so much energy. I felt like I could run, and I'm not a person. I still don't run to this day. I think you shouldn't run unless you got to run.
Right.
I'm a big person. I don't want to run. So I was like, dang, I can run. I can leap mountains. I can do everything. It's so great. I did all my homework that night. Probably didn't do it very well, but I did it, confidently. Cleaned my room. Dude, I was on cloud 9. Something not good. And I remember I was 14, so 3 months later, been doing it pretty regularly. Stayed out most nights, just, I'm going to this friend's house, so I'm doing this, and I would just be in town, or I would end up in random people's houses just doing things, and I met this dude. He was 20 years old. I'm 14. That became my boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem in itself.
Very big problem.
And I just remember one of the first days we were hanging out, he was like, oh, do you smoke pot? And I was like, yeah, I love dope. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, pot, right? And I was like, yeah, my parents call it dope. And he was like, oh, okay, you got old parents too, right? He's giggling.
Yeah.
And, he pulls out his weed, and it's clearly marijuana. And I was like, huh. And then I pulled out my weed, and I was like, why does mine look like that? And he was like, huh. He was meth head too, so it kind of worked. Well, it didn't work out, but it worked out in that sense. Yeah. He was like, wow, I didn't know you were like that. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, it's meth. And I was like, oh.
Whoops.
Yeah. I just, at that point, I remember I got caught with actual weed a couple months later. And I remember, I know they didn't mean it the way they did, but they knew at one point when I was in middle school, I was in 8th grade at this point, they knew I wanted to be a teacher or something with special education. And they basically told me, if you smoke weed, you can't be a teacher. You can't do anything. And I was like, in my head, like the way they worded that just brought me to this conclusion of, well, crap. I'm smoking meth, and y'all don't know that. So yeah. I guess I just ruined my life. Here we go. And I just did not care. I was very depressed, I was undiagnosed bipolar disorder. So I was very up and down, just very, drugs did not, it was just not a good combination.
No, yeah,
my parents were very wrapped up in their own issues and going through trying to want a divorce, didn't know, and it's not to say they were neglectful, but I don't think they meant to be that way, because I'd always been independent. So they kind of were just like, oh, she's just doing the teenager thing. Mm-hmm. Monitor your kids, please.
Definitely. If you're listening, monitor your kids.
Yeah, I ended up, I was 15 at this point, and I remember I had a miscarriage. I guess it's counted as a miscarriage because he came out and he died shortly after. I don't know. I wasn't in the hospital even. It was in the woods. It was very, and I remember the next day I went to buy, I was gonna do heroin, and I got needles and everything. I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna go in, whatever. And I remember just thinking, is this how I want to be? And I dropped it and I left, and he was like, whoa, you gave me the money, you want it? And I was like, no, keep it, I don't care. And never saw him again. I never went back. I cold turkeyed myself at 15 years old. My mom thought I had the flu.
Yeah.
She now knows it was not the flu. We talked. And then fast forward, I went to Burchell High School after my freshman year in Wasilla, which was, I somehow only failed one class. Most of the classes were D's, a couple C's.
That's what I was in high school, solid D's.
Yeah, like I had one failed class though, and I remember one of the teachers coming up to me, one of the only teachers that actually talked to me in that school, like, and wasn't just like pushing these kids through. And he was like, I don't think this is a good fit for you. And I was like, what, high school? Are you going to tell me I'm going to fail too? And he was like, no, you're not going to fail. I'm telling you, you've been treated like that. You need to go to Burchell. And I was like, huh, what's that? So I went to Burchell High School. And I remember my first day, I was so terrified. I remember even like when I get down today, I still have to think back on being in that school and remembering how encouraging they were. No matter what, they were like, you can do it, you can do it. Because they weren't just trying to get kids to pass grades. They were trying to get us a high school diploma, but they wanted us to know that this is going to get you point A to point B of your life. So, and you know, parents are divorced at this point. I was 17. My mom's still rocky, and I ended up getting kicked out of her home. And I found myself pregnant 2 weeks after I had been kicked out. So I'm 17, graduated high school. I'm homeless at this point. So I just instantly was like, well, I have a kid on the way. You know, most people, they're young parents. They either do it or they don't.
Yep.
I had to do it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try and get a job. I was applying everywhere. I had a couple interviews here and there, but they all instantly were like, oh, this is your first job? This is your first job? And I was instantly telling them, I'm this many weeks pregnant. You know, they can't fire you. They can't not hire you for that, but they also don't have to disclose why. So catch-22 in this state, they can fire you for anything and say it's anything when it's something they can't fire you for. So, you know, I just wasn't getting a job. And I remember I had an interview to be a cake decorator at Cars. And the lady instantly prefaced it with, I probably won't hire you. You're 17 and this is your first job and you have no baking experience. And I was like, okay. And I'm in my head. And I was just like, oh, well, I learned really well, but I understand if I'm not qualified. And in my head, I'm thinking it's literally decorating a cake.
Yeah.
I know how to do that.
Yeah. I can figure it out even if I didn't.
They have the special piping things. Anyway, you know, and she just, after the interview, she was like, well, I think you definitely have good ambition. Have you thought about the My House building? And I was like, the My House building. And I'm like, your house? And I was like, do you want me to clean your house? What? And I was like, asking her, I was like, I don't know, this is kind of weird, but like, if you're wanting to hire me as a maid or something, like I'll figure it out. I'll do it. And she was like, no, not my house, honey. Like my house, the building. And I was like, what? And she was like, the homeless youth center. And I was like, there's a homeless youth center? A what? This is a thing. I'm not the only homeless kid, you know? And I was like, wow, okay. And she told me it was right down the road. So I walked out of Cars and I walked down here. And I remember the first thing that I was introduced with was, it wasn't a hi, how are you? It was a hi, how can we help you? Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is weird. Like I'm a kid and you want to help me? And I remember I sat down at Patricia's desk. She doesn't work here anymore. She was our 9-star. I
remember her.
Yeah. And she just instantly, I was telling her, I was like, well, I just had an interview at Cars and they sent me down here because I have no job experience and I'm pregnant. And she was like, you're pregnant? Oh, we're getting you a job. Wait, are you on Medicaid? And I was like, yeah, I have Medicaid. I think I had food stamps, but they said I couldn't have them because I live at my mom's, but I've been homeless for 2 months. And she was like, you're pregnant and you're homeless. No, you're hired. Like, we're going to help you. And I was like, whoa. And she just instantly like was telling people, go away. I'm helping her. Go away. I'm helping her. And I was like, what? Like, you just told your boss to go away. And she, you know, we went and brought me into the boutique. We had an interview with Ian and River. And I worked in the boutique until I was about 38 weeks pregnant. And then 2 weeks later, I gave birth to Piper. And I remember how helpful and how set up I was. You know, at 17, I had money in my savings, and I was set up to have a child. Wasn't just going in this like, Mom, can you help me buy diapers? And, you know, not to say that's a bad thing. If you have help, get it. But I didn't have that.
Yeah.
You know, I was barely on the cusp of getting it together with my mom. I was in her house, and then I moved out shortly after into another safe house. And I ended up moving into Anchorage at 18. And Patricia called me, and she was like, how's it going in Anchorage? And I was like, well, I can't find a job. And she was like, why didn't you call me? And I was like, oh, because I'm in Anchorage. And she was like, yeah, 9 stars out there. And I was like, oh, oops, didn't know. They got me. I ended up getting 2 jobs. They called for 9 Star, couldn't do internships at Annie Ann's, but they called and referenced me. So they hired me, and then they got me an internship at Subway. So I was working 2 jobs with the help of 9 Star. I ended up switching just to Annie Ann's because, I like that better. So I was working there almost a little over a year and a half, and then COVID hit. I became homeless with my ex. He delved in, he was a recovered addict. He started using again. You know, and it's a slippery slope. I mean, I had almost 6 years of sobriety on me, but I was watching a man I loved just crumble. And I didn't get it. I was like, I never thought I would go back to this. And I just said, F it, I'm going to do it. So I went down with them. We ended up moving out to Wasilla, and he, you know, I mean, I forgive him, but it was the person that drugs made him was just not who I met. And I didn't get it for a long time. I didn't get it. Didn't understand how he wasn't the same person. Didn't understand. I didn't want to believe anybody when they told me he wasn't safe. And I remember it got to a point where my daughter got taken out of our care because we were homeless. I was clean at this point. I had a week's sobriety on me, but they didn't know previously that I was using anyway. Right. So they took me for safety concerns because of him mostly, because you're sober when you're with someone who's clearly not, and you have an almost 3-year-old. It's just not a good combination for them.
Yeah, not a good mix.
Not good. No, she was almost 2. Aging her. Anyway, and I remember a couple weeks later, he kidnapped me, actually, held me hostage for 3 days. And I ended up getting a hold of the cops. When I went, he let me go into Fred Meyer's out here to go get us food because he was convinced in his head I wasn't going to. It was fine. I'm not mad. As I'm like, you just held me hostage in your car for 3 days. You know, okay, buddy, I have a breaking point.
Yeah.
Called the cops, and I remember I was sitting in the hotel, and I called Denali. So I still had her number. I was like, I don't know what you guys can do, but this is my situation. My daughter got taken. This is where I'm at. This is what happened. I'm not safe. I need help. And she was like, we have housing. I can get you in on Monday. Can you hold on for 2 days? And I was like, you have housing? So I came in on Monday. She was like, you're going to have to pass P test. And I was like, I can pass. I promise you. I've been sober. I have, at this point, I had 3 weeks on me. I was like, I have 3 weeks. I promise I can do it. And I passed the drug test. I had to clean my clothes because gasoline was on them. That's a long story. I walked in and she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I remember the first night in there, I was so terrified. You know, I had this, like, because I didn't know what to expect with the housing. I mean, I thought it was like a shelter, but it was, you know, it was an actual house. It was a whole house. There was a kitchen. They gave me food that I could cook. I had my own spot in the fridge and shelving. I had my own bed. And I just remember for the first time in almost a year, I felt safe. Like I could lay my head down. And I remember I just slept the whole night like a baby. I didn't care. And I remember I still was talking to my ex stupidly. I still just didn't want to believe Kira. I didn't want to believe anybody when they were like, that's not how a woman's supposed to be treated. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I knew I was the problem. I was the problem. It was me. It was not. And I remember he tried to kill me when I was I've been in housing about a month and a half. I remember I was in Carly's house at this point, and I just remember how terrified. I was more terrified in that moment after I went to the hospital and they confirmed baby. My son was okay, who I was pregnant with. They confirmed he's all right. He's perfect. His heartbeat's good. I remember being so terrified because the trooper was like, oh, I see your address is 300 North Willow Street, so you're in their housing. I'm going to call Justin. And I just remember I started bawling. I think I cried harder at that than what had just happened, you know. Mm-hmm. And I just remember crying and saying, please don't call him. Please don't call him. He's going to be mad. They're going to be so mad at me. They're going to be so mad at me. And he was like, okay, I won't call. He went out and called them. Mm-hmm. He called Justin, and I just remember Justin, he handed me my phone because he told me he was going to call my mom, quote unquote. He didn't do that.
Plot twist.
Yeah, and he handed me my phone, and it was Justin, and I was like, I'm in trouble. I'm going to get kicked out because they moved me into the housing to be safe from him, and here I am, like, in the hospital because of him. And I just remember the first thing he said is, are you okay? Why would I be mad at you? Why would I be mad at you? And I was like, well, because you moved me in. He was like, yes, we moved you in there because of him. We knew this is a slippery slope. Do you know that you are safe now? Do you know you are safe? And I was like, yes, I know I'm safe. He was like, okay, Carly's going to come get you. And I remember just how, I was just ready. I was at my breaking point, and I didn't vocalize it, but I think Carly knew. I remember she drove me over to the gas station to get me a soda. And, she looked at me on the way home, and she was like, I'm going to tell you something. I need you to take all that pain and all that hurt that he created, and I need you to fight for your kids and fight for yourself. And I still think about that. Anytime, I have God, but I think about things like that. I think about a sentence like that. Anytime I start breaking down, I'll be praying, and then I just think about that. Fight for your kids, take all that anger and all that hurt and fight for your kids. And I never stopped doing that. I know they had, after a couple months in housing, I think I worked at Subway, and then I worked at Fred Meyer's, and it was just not working out. I'm trying to get my kids back. Well, not kids. I had one in my tummy. They couldn't really take that one. Right. But I'm trying to convince them that I can not only take care of my daughter, who they're trying to put back in my home, but I can also take care of a baby. I have 8 hours at Fred Meyer's a week. Mm-hmm. I remember that. 16-hour paychecks. And they're like, oh, 2 kids on that much money? Okay. And I was like, I just remember I went to Kira, and I was crying. I just started crying my little pregnancy hormones. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because they're right. How am I supposed to do this? And she was like, okay, well, we're going to get you an internship then. And I was like, I already did one. She was like, well, we're not going to put you in the cafe or the boutique again. How about a bookstore? Would you do a bookstore? And I remember walking in, and Taylor immediately was like, hi, you're hired. If you mess up, you're going to be fired. And I just, you're hired, like instantly. She didn't even know my name yet. She was, hi, you're hired. And she was so excited to just have an intern to help her. Mm-hmm. I still go in and check and tell her about my life. I get to show her my kids. I get to show her pictures of my wedding. It's mm-hmm. just so amazing. Yeah. And now I have an apartment because of you guys, too. Not because of you guys, but you guys got me. You guys helped me with the grant. Mm-hmm. You helped me find the housing voucher that I needed. I don't know where I would have been. If I didn't have that support, I don't know, would have been really bad. Definitely wouldn't have my kids. Wouldn't be able to go pick them up at daycare. I wouldn't have met my husband. Not that every client meets a husband, their significant other, but I wouldn't have met my husband. Right.
We actually discourage that. And to be fair.
I know you do. We did not listen.
I remember that you guys, it didn't start out looking for a relationship. I remember that very clearly.
He's just a cool friend. I just like listening to him play guitar. Mm-hmm. Now I get to sit in my bed and listen to him play guitar right next to me.
Yeah, it worked out good for you. It typically does not work out. I'm just going to say a disclaimer. It typically does not work out.
Don't go searching for love. Please.
Right.
Don't do that.
Not at my house. Wait until you're better established.
Be stable.
Usually.
Be stable.
Be stable. You know, you went through your story so beautifully, and you highlighted points that were just really, really powerful. Knowing you for as long as I have, I just haven't had the opportunity to hear all of those details, from meeting you for the first time at King's Chapel and then all the way until seeing you again here. And one thing that I definitely want to highlight is that, you know, your story, what is common amongst our clients who are successful, is that you do the work. You hold true to the hand up, not a handout. Because you did that.
Well, because if I just take a handout, then I'm just going to still be in the same place with, a blanket? Not to say don't help people in that sense, but you got to, okay, I got a blanket, so now I'm warm. What am I going to do tomorrow?